All right. Okay, people are joining in, so just giving a quick second for the people to start rolling. I always just want to make sure. Okay. Uh, Hi, everybody. You have access to the chat, so please feel free to say hi. We'd love to hear where you're calling in from, so to speak. So let us know in the chat where you're at in the world, because I know there's people from everywhere. Hello, good morning for Canada and DC metro area. So yes, I'm guessing you're just starting your day. South Africa, UK. Amazing. Portugal, California, we'd love to have your weather right now. Leeds, amazing. So a lot of people. Um, Gregory, you're from Belgium, if I remember correctly.
Yes, exactly. I'm from
Yeah.
Belgium.
Anyone from Belgium here, if you like to say hi, bonjour, whatever, whatever you prefer. Paris, France, so kind of close.
It's perfect. It's
Wall
bonjour
art.
too.
They appreciate your wall art, Gregory. Amazing. Maybe you can tell them a bit more about that later. Really awesome. All right, so yeah, I see. Well, people were still gonna be joining as we go, but I think most people have joined. Welcome everybody to our second session in our analytics masterclass. I'm Noah. I'm customer success lead at Planable. We're a social media management tool, and we help teams of all sizes plan, create, and approve their content. And we decided to have this masterclass about analytics because it seems like such a scary subject, honestly. But we all have to do it one way or another. It helps us grow, it helps with strategy. So we thought we would try to break it down into several topics so it's a bit easier to go through and kind of, take the scariness out of it and really dive deep into these topics and see what we need to do with all of this metrics and benchmarks and reporting and so on. Today's topic is going to be benchmarking, and we're gonna talk about benchmarking from 2 points of views. We'll start by talking about general social media metrics benchmarking, and I'm going to be talking a bit about that. And then we'll have Gregory, who's our expert for the day, who's going to be talking more about how benchmarking can help you figure out if you're talking to the right audience and how you can adjust to the relevant benchmark as you go and you're figuring out who's the audience for you. And he's gonna explain it a lot better than I just did. But yeah, a couple of housekeeping rules. So we will keep all the questions for the very end, so after both presentations. But you can put your questions in the chat or the Q&A section as we go, and I'm gonna make sure to go through them and ask them and answer them at the end. And there will be a recording available probably by tomorrow, sometime tomorrow. You'll receive that via email. So yes, that will be available. All right, well, I think those were the main things I wanted to cover. I'll get started with the first presentation, and yeah, then we'll go over to Gregory. Let me, mm, okay, just getting ready here. All right. So, as I mentioned, we're going to start with just general benchmarking when it comes to social media. And the way that we're going to look at this is, does it really matter? Do benchmarks really matter? We hear a lot about them. And more specifically, what we're going to do today is, well, first, a bit of a spoiler, but yes, we do believe benchmarks matter. So we're going to try to understand exactly why they do. Then we're going to talk about the different types of benchmarks that there are. And we'll also determine how to use them in our strategy. So, once we understand why they're useful and what types there are, we're going to talk a bit about what to do with them. So starting with what is a social media benchmark, and a benchmark in general is sort of like the baseline, right? That you compare yourself to. And in this context, it's a performance standard that allows social media teams to assess and compare the effectiveness of various strategies and campaigns, but also set realistic social media goals. And we're going to go into a bit more details in just a couple of minutes. And the way that you can use social media benchmark is you can go as granular as pitting a specific metric against one brand, or you can go as broad as comparing overall performance through an industry-wide average. So there's a lot of room to kind of choose how you look at benchmarks. These are a few examples of social media metrics that you can look at when you're talking about benchmarking. Some of the most common ones, let's say, but definitely keep in mind that the metric that you're looking at depends on your brand, your company, where you're at, and what's relevant to you and your context. But yeah, just a couple of the most common ones like follower growth rate, campaign performance mentions, number of posts published, and then recently engagement, there's been this emergence of outbound engagement, so they have been a bit separated. So we have inbound engagement, which is everything that is happening on your page, all the, comments and messages are coming to you. And then outbound engagement is when your brand goes outside to other pages and, tries to create, buzz and just kind of be out there and be visible. So why do benchmarks matter? Couple of reasons. First, they help you understand how well you're doing, especially in the beginning, right? And let's be honest, if you work in social media, if you're a social media manager, analytics and data is just a small part of what you have to do. And for a lot of people, it's not the most pleasant part. But looking at benchmarking and seeing where you're situated will help you understand where you are, what's like how good you're doing. And then you can take it a step further and assess where you stand in the market. So look like, okay, this is where we are in regards to the baseline, but where are other people in, that are relevant to us, like competitors and such. And also it'll help you direct you to areas where there's room for improvement. So again, looking at benchmarking, just like a snapshot can already kind of inform you where you could be spending a bit more time or where you would need to grow a bit more. And then we also believe that benchmarking matters when it comes to your content strategy. It helps you learn how your content strategy is resonating with your audience. And by that, I mean, you're going to be looking at your content over time and how does that impact your position in that baseline. And it could help you kind of figure that. Okay, we covered why benchmarking is important, and I hope we kind of understood that it really can help you understand where you're getting started from. But let's talk a bit about the different types of benchmarks. So first we have industry benchmarks, and this help you serve as inspiration. So this is where you have the very big picture, right? You see what's the benchmark for my industry, whether it's automotive, FMCG, beauty, whatever it may be. You're looking at it and seeing like, where do I align myself with that benchmark? So that's a very good start. Then we want to zoom in a bit and look at competitive benchmarks. So now we want to narrow down a bit because industry, can be very big. There's a lot of sub-industries, niches. So you want to look at what's relevant to you. And especially when you're looking at competitors, try to find those that are relevant to you, those that are similar in size or similar in niche, again, in their goal, so that it really will help you give your performance context. So when you're looking at your industry benchmark, you might see like, oh, I'm a bit below benchmark, but I'm pretty close. But then when you look at your competitors, maybe you'll find that the most relevant competitors are actually a bit above benchmark. So that could be like, okay, so I'm not actually striving just for the baseline. I should be striving to be even a bit on top of it. So this is just an example. And then we have personal benchmarks. So this is where we look at what's our internal baseline, like based on what we've done and our metrics, this is the baseline, and how do we compare to this over time? And this should inform your immediate goal. So when you look at personal benchmarks, this should be also the first thing, be like, okay, again, an example seems like our follower growth has been, sort of stagnant. We had a nice growth rate a year ago, but we're not really doing anything else on this. Maybe that's fine. Maybe you're where you're supposed to be and you want to shift focus. But if you're not, then that will definitely inform your immediate goal. And just to kind of give a quick recap here, so you shouldn't choose one type of benchmark necessarily. I think it's relevant to kind of look at all three of them. Just keep in mind the type of information that you're getting. So you're kind of starting from the very broad picture and just narrowing it down. Each type of benchmark just kind of informs you in a slight different way. And now let's, talk about what you're actually doing with all of this information and how it can help your social media strategy. So number one is choosing a key metric to compare with when it comes to your competitors and industry. We in our previous session, maybe some of you attended. We talked with Sophie Miller from Pretty Little Marketing, and we talked about metrics in general, how you look at them, which ones are relevant to each brand. And a question that came up was, how do I prioritize, right? Because there's a lot of metrics you're juggling with, and they all seem important in their own way. But when you need to focus, like, how do you know which one to pick? And Sophie's advice was, which I think was very useful, was first of all, kind of uh, prepare a timeline of like what's my goal, what's my objective. If I have, she gave a great example. She said, I'm preparing a live event in 4 months. So in 4 months, my goal is going to be obviously to talk about the event and get people coming and tickets. So 3 months in advance, what I want to do, or 4 months in advance, what I want to do is really focus on reach, because I want to have as many people come to my community so that when I start promoting my event, I already have that pool of people. So breaking down your short-term objectives and long-term objectives so that you can choose what to focus on really, really helps. And it's the same with benchmarking, because essentially you then look, you can look at benchmarks for all of your metrics, or all the most relevant to you, and then you can kind of see where's the biggest gap from where you think you should be, and focus on that metric first. So don't try to kind of go in all directions, because that might be definitely a bit more difficult, and it'll also be a bit difficult to draw some conclusions. Next, also set actionable goals. So it's not, enough to say, oh, yeah, we definitely need to increase engagement. Looks like we're below the benchmark and everybody else is above. We have to do that. That's great, but now you have to set up not why, sorry, how. What are you actually going to do to achieve this? And a big part that I think can come in here is going a bit deeper into that competitor research. Choose 1, 2, 3 examples of the competitors that are where you want to be, or around where you want to be on that specific metric, and look, take a deeper dive and see what are they doing. What do you think that from their social media presence is leading to that result? And then try things, test things, but have a list of things that are actually actions that are gonna lead to you improving that benchmark. And obviously track your results, right? Because you want to see how is it going, where did you start from, and where are you going? And this also leads back to those personal benchmarks that we were talking about. Always keep track from where you started, where you're going, to just be aware of what's working and not. And then the very last one, but super important, is always tweak and adapt your strategy, because things can change so quickly. As we all know in social media, it's never only up to us. We're all we all have to comply to all of the changes that are coming from the social media channels, new formats, algorithm changes, and so on. So be aware of that. Don't be scared. Kind of try to calculate that in if possible, but just be aware and always tweak and adapt. So, maybe you started with some strategy. Let's take a very positive example and say you've had, I don't know, a post goes viral and you have an influx of followers coming in. So you've kind of reached your target already. Focus now, see, it might not be as relevant now to bring in followers. You might focus on engaging with them. So yeah, try and tweak and adapt. So to kind of summarize a bit what we kind of went over with social media benchmarks, they're very useful because they give us a starting point, so we know what to compare with ourselves and also with people in our industry and our competitors, and they can really help inform our strategy. They can really lead to very actionable things, and allow us to have a clear path on how we want to grow. All right, so this was our very like kind of starter presentation to kind of lay the groundwork on just general social media metrics. And now we're gonna kind of zoom in. I really like this expression, looks like it, on audience and how do we, because sometimes you might be doing everything right, but it doesn't move the needle. And so there are times when it's good to kind of take a step back and look at the very basics. And that can start with, am I speaking to the right audience? Are they the right ones for me? You might have a large following that's not engaging. So, after you've tried, let's say, different types of content and it's still there's no budge, maybe it's time to kind of take a step back and think about, are they the right people for me? Am I attracting the right people? And how can I change that? And more importantly, how can benchmarking help with that? So without further ado, this is where I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and gonna take it over to Gregory and let him tell us more about this. I don't know, did I get a chance? I don't think I got a chance. Gregory here with us is head of consulting and research at Audience with an S for about 3 years. And I'm gonna let him talk a bit more about what Audience the tool does and how they help with benchmarking. So Gregory, whenever you're ready, I'll take it over to you.
Perfect, thank you. I check where I can share the screen. Okay, perfect. I think it's okay. Let's go.
I see there's a quick question before we get started. Yes, so there will be a recording available. If you just click on the present, Gregory.
Present just here. Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
And also maybe we can do it full screen, like the very bottom.
Mm,
There's
just here,
a
an
bit more
option?
to the,
No,
yeah,
here full screen. Okay,
perfect, amazing.
perfect. Thank you so much. So yes, thank you for that. The most important question is now to understand if of course the benchmark is useful or not. For me, it's yes, of course, it's very useful, but I want to explain why it's very important to develop a specific insight knowledge around benchmark and how we can use that for every study, but not with the same benchmark, of course. That depend of the kind of the study in this case. So just a quick point on audience with a S. So it's a company specialized in the audience intelligence. So it's very, very important to know that. I come from Prism. Prism is one of the last acquisition of audience. Prism is specialized in audience intelligence too, but specifically on digital intelligence, because at Audience we have two big important department or universe around digital intelligence and social intelligence. We analyze the interest, the psychographic profile with the digital, and we analyze the social listening and the profiling segmentation based on that, on the social intelligence in this case. The most important part for audience surprise and audience insight is one of the first part of the positioning is to have a comparative analysis between a target audience and a benchmark audience. And you can select, you can modify the targets, you can modify the benchmark, of course, but this is the baseline. This is the most important part. We do comparative analysis between two different audience to identify the best insight in this case. So in this universe, it's very important to make the bridge between the digital world and the physical world. This is the most important, with the digital intelligence, with the social intelligence, and with the audience intelligence, the global audience intelligence. The most important bridge is this one, to connect two different worlds with the data. So it's very important to work with data driven today to develop a specific knowledge. So competitive analysis is very important at this stage. And finally, we have different kind of partnership with Twitter, with Meta, with IBM Watson, and so on, with Pulsar, Meltwater, Global Web Index, of course, to combine different kind of sources and to have the best insight at the end of the process. So if we want to explain the most important part is the use case, it's important just to explain the audience intelligence and the combination between audience and surprism. So for surprism, it's very important just to define that, because the use case is based on metadata. So here we use surprism and audience to combine both. So we have an access to a panel of 3 billion digital user. So we can analyze every universe, every topics, every socio-demographic insight, every psychographic criteria. We have a lot of database in this case. And the most important, it's not just to have a connection with the data, but we have more than 200 predefined persona. So like that, when you launch a project, a report, you can directly identify the best persona associated with your target and of course your audience. And moreover, you can customize the persona. So if you have a specific persona for your brand, for your industry, we can directly take this persona and put this persona on the platform. And like that, this is a second point and a second benchmark. You can directly, when you select a target audience, you can directly connect and verify if your persona is associated with your target audience. So you have the target audience, the persona, the own persona, the custom persona, and the benchmark at the end. So when I explain that, it's very important to jump now directly on the combination of audience and surprise. So the goal is just to summarize that. We have Twitter, Facebook, Instagram data. We create different kind of segmentation with audience based on, for example, author list, if you want to connect with the social listening, and you have the predefined persona on surprise based on meta audience and metadata in this case. So it's now we can jump directly on the use case, and the use case is this one. So we analyze here, just for the presentation, I take Ford brand. It's not the brand for this use case, but just to respect the confidentiality of the project, I modify the name of the brand and the universe, but it's exactly the same universe, car industry, and like that we can explain the methodology from the first discovery of the audience, just to understand the audience knowledge to the recommendation give at the client at the end of the process. So we have different kind of objective in this presentation, but also in the use case. Just and like that, we can fix the goal of the presentation. It's important for me to distinguish different kind of result or different kind of benchmark. And if I select, for example, a benchmark, it's very important to connect the selection of the benchmark with the goal of the study. For example, it's possible to analyze a brand around a specific universe or in a specific industry. If I want to analyze the brand's awareness or brand knowledge, it's not exactly the same. If I want to analyze the positioning of a brand based on a specific persona or like a large family, for example. So we need to modify the benchmark if I just want to have a specific knowledge or if I just want to see the global positioning of a brand. And of course, if I want to develop some brand strategy for a brand, for Ford, for example, if maybe another case and another kind of exercise to define another benchmark in this case. So each benchmark can use and can explain different kind of insight, but that depends of the question at the beginning of the process. So for the first exercise, I just discover a brand, so develop a specific knowledge around the brand to identify the fan, to identify the socio-demographic insight, the profiling insights, so around psychographic insight and lifestyle profile. This is the first exercise. And for this exercise, for example, I select just a target. My target is Ford, for example, in US. And the benchmark, it's the global population in US. Why I select just the population? It's very easy. It's to understand what's the most important part of Ford and most important distinction between Ford and the global population. So it's the basic benchmark in this case. Like that, I can directly identify in green the Ford penetration and in blue the global population penetration. And like that, with my benchmark, I can see if I have an over-indexing or an under-indexing based on different age group, based on different population or gender or status, for example. I can see in the same exercise if the language is important or not for the target. And in this case, Spanish, for example, is very relevant because it's different between the Ford audience and the benchmark. And I can directly see the same for the age group. For example, the 35 plus are more associated with Ford than the rest of the population. So it's important. And for men, okay, it's normal because men is more associated with Ford, but also with the car industry. So like that, I have directly my target and my benchmark, and I can directly identify some insight on this part. I can do exactly the same exercise with lifestyle. So like that, I can here just analyze the penetration and the opportunity score. The opportunity score is a specific score developed by audience. And the goal is to combine penetration, so the size of the target, but also the affinity and the penetration on the interest around the lifestyle profile. So like that, the opportunity score integrates directly in the metrics, the benchmark, to identify the best score and the best lifestyle to activate and to develop a specific content, for example. And in this case, the for the score, for example, if the score is over 60, the opportunity is very high. If it's under 60, the opportunity is not high, so it's not relevant. And like that here, for example, we can identify different kind of universe of content like rural or suburban. It's very important for Ford universe. For example, high tech, of course, is the case. We can identify all the universe around security, control freak, and so on. It's very also important for Ford, and more for Ford than the rest of the population in US. So we can directly, with the benchmark, identify the most important thing. And we can do exactly the same, but with audience inside, for example. And here, the most important thing is another kind of benchmark metrics. It's to analyze the overlap between Ford, for example, and a competitor like Chevrolet, like Dodge, like Toyota. And in the first line, you can directly identify the penetration and the overlap between Ford and Chevrolet. And so when you create a specific content, or when you select a specific ambassador, or when you want to define a new competitive analysis, it's important to use that and to identify this overlap between your brand and the competitor. Like that, you can list and you can rank the most important overlap with Chevrolet, Dodge, and so on, and the less important overlap. And like that, you can define the competitor, the most important competitor in your universe. And with the benchmark, with the overlap is one of the most important metrics, I think, in the benchmark analysis. And it's very useful to analyze the competitive analysis, of course. We have exactly the same with institution, people, and so on. So it's exactly the same use case. So just to summarize this part, I think we have three different metrics, very useful in benchmark analysis. So in the competitive analysis, the first is the number of the follower of a brand or of the competitor. And we have the overlap of the follower between my brand and my competitor, or between my brand and my industry in different cases. And like that, we have three most important metrics to use here just in the first step. The first step is the brand awareness or the brand knowledge. We have another kind of analysis or another kind of insight to identify. It's the positioning, the brand positioning, or the competitive analysis. In this case, we have the benchmark is very important, and we have another kind of exercise to do. So in the first step, I just discovery my brand, and in this case, I use in my benchmark, I use the global population. But when I want to positioning a brand or to analyze a competition, I need to modify my benchmark. In this case, the first exercise is to analyze the large family in, for example, in the universe of Ford. So in this case, I just validate if my persona is relevant or not for Ford. In this case, I can see that every persona based on the age group associated with the large family are very, very relevant for Ford, because the opportunity score is over 60. So I can validate, okay, perfect. I know that for Ford, the large family persona is very relevant, and I can activate this one. Okay, this is the first step. But I know that Ford is not alone on the car industry. So maybe it's important to analyze the penetration of Ford associated with the large family. And in benchmark, I want to select the automotive industry just to compare and just to know if I want to activate the large family. Okay, perfect. It's my goal. But maybe my industry is has a better positioning than my brand. It's not the case here, because we can directly see that Ford is it's a very good positioning on the large family compared with the positioning of the automotive industry on the large family, and it's exactly the same for every age group associated with the large family. So like that, we know that large family is very important for Ford. We know that Ford has a competitive advantage based on the large family compared with the automotive industry. So no, it's important to know that if Ford is better or not than a specific competitor. So like that, I can test no with Toyota, for example. I take Toyota and I check if Ford is has a better positioning on a large family persona than Toyota. And it's the same. We have the same result, and we can confirm that Ford is has a very good positioning on a large family persona. It's better on the competitive analysis compared with the automotive industry. And Ford is better than Toyota in the same persona. So we have a checklist, and we can confirm that the benchmark is very useful, and we can validate the strategy on this universe. So when we have a good positioning, we know that, okay, Ford can use the large family. It's a very relevant persona to activate and to develop a specific new product, new model on this universe to convince the large family to buy a new car, a new Ford in this case. When I know that it's important because Ford is better on the market, on the industry, and on the competitor. And no, I want to develop the brand, so develop a strategy for the brand. In this case, the benchmark will be very different because we need to understand what the most important difference between Ford and finally my persona, so the large family. And like that, I use Ford in target and I use large family persona in benchmark to see where I have some conversions between Ford and my goal. My goal is to convince the large family persona, and where I have a big difference between the Ford fan and the large family persona. So in this case, I develop different kind of metrics, and just to validate different cluster and different segmentation, I identify the most important point is this one. I identify that Ford and a large family converge in different age group. The first is the 18 to 33, and the second is the 45 plus. But maybe the weakness of Ford based on the large family and compared with the large family persona is the age group 34-44, because we can see directly that in this group we have no correspondence, we have no convergence between Ford and large family persona. We want to test another point on brand strategy is the personality trait. So we want just to identify the overlap, the convergence, or the over indexing and the under indexing in different kind of personality trait. In this case, the most important is the last. So it is the pleasure seeker. The pleasure seeker is one of the most personality traits associated with the large family. And it's not associated with Ford. Ford, it's more associated with explorer and achiever. So we can see the big difference between the two audience with the benchmark. And if Ford want to develop a specific positioning to convince the large family, for example, we need to develop a specific positioning also on the pleasure seeker. And this is one of the most important recommendation in the final goal of the presentation and the recommendation for Ford, for the brand, is to reinforce the pleasure seeking and to reduce the part of explorer and achiever. It's associated with one specific model and one specific persona. It's not to modify the positioning of Ford, It's not to explain that, okay, no, Ford need to modify everything and to reduce Explorer and Achiever in the profile. No, it's not the goal. It's just to develop a specific positioning on one specific persona, to positioning one specific model in this universe. So in this case, we need to increase the pleasure and the funny element around the brand positioning and the content. And like that, we can see the difference between the target and the benchmark, and we can develop a specific content around fun element, funny positioning. So finally, we can also recommend the different kind of content. So we spoke about content, but car interior design is very important for the large family. The kids equipment, it's also very important, and different kind of interior gadget like high tech and so on, it's also important for the large family. So like that, we can define different kind of content, visualization, and so on, to positioning a new model in this specific persona. And without the analysis of the benchmark based on the large family persona compared with the Ford in target, we cannot identify this content, and we cannot identify this new positioning for the brand. So finally, we have a different element to keep in mind. Just the most important thing is I can select every kind of benchmark, but the most important thing is to define a benchmark associated with a question. If my question is to analyze or to have more knowledge around the brand, okay, the best way is to select a broad benchmark, a broad audience, so maybe the national audience in this case, just to identify the most important point, like the socio-demographic aspect, like the psychographic aspect. It's just to understand my universe, my fan base, my fan universe, or the fan universe around my brand. You can do exactly the same for your competitor. So you select the competitor in target, and you don't modify the benchmark. You select the national benchmark, and like that, you have the specific view on your competitor. This is the brand knowledge. If my question is around, it's associated with positioning and or competitive analysis, it's another case. But in this case, we need to define a specific benchmark associated with maybe a segmentation, maybe an industry, maybe a competitor, to have a specific view on what are the most important difference between my brand and my industry, or my competitor, or my segment. And finally, if I want to develop a specific new strategy around a product, or maybe around a new brand, if it's possible, it's totally possible. I want, in this case, win more new, maybe consumer. In this case, it's very important to identify in target the goal of my new modification and my new strategy. So here, if my strategy is to positioning my brand on the large family persona, the benchmark is the large family persona. So you select directly your goal in benchmark, and you conserve in target your brand or your model. We can analyze a model or a specific product, and like that, you develop a specific strategy based on the benchmark, and the benchmark is your final goal. And that's it, I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gregory, so much. That was very interesting, and I think it was super helpful to have this clear example and kind of taking it through all the steps. It's a lot easier to kind of keep track of that. We had a couple of questions, and two of them are pretty similar.
Mhm.
And they're talking about well, one is specific about Prism and audience, but how does it work for B2B businesses? Is there a
Mhm.
way this can apply and not just to direct consumer?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. So with the meta interest, we have a lot of interest around of course, criteria, brand, and we have different job title, for example, or job function. So if you want to develop a specific knowledge based on B2B universe, it's totally possible. Like that, you do the same. You select your target, your benchmark, but you modify the benchmark and you select maybe job title universe, or maybe yeah, a different kind of B2B interest. The list is very high, so we can select a lot of criteria, and we can compose specific universe around B2B inside.
Perfect. Awesome. We have another question coming in about, can you talk a bit more about the difference between audience insights and Prism?
Mhm.
How do you know which platform is best? I'll let you talk more about this so I don't say anything wrong, but yeah.
The difference between, the most important difference is the source, because on audience we have a direct connection with Twitter, and on Surprise we have a direct connection with Meta. And with that, this is the first difference. The other difference is the segmentation. For example, on Meta, like I present the result, we have predefined persona. So we can custom the persona. On audience, this is an algorithmic segmentation. So we don't know the last segmentation at the end of the process, you know? So it just is very important to distinguish both, because in the first step, we validate some different, with Supreme, we validate different persona. On audience, we don't validate persona. We discover a new universe. We discover new segmentation. Maybe it's not exactly the same segmentation that I want to identify, but in this case, it's a very important discovery of the insight is the segmentation, the algorithmic segmentation. And finally, the last but not the least difference, on Suprism, we have no individual result. So we can identify you and me on Suprism, on Meta. It's not possible. We need to create an audience, and an audience, it's a minimum of 10,000 people, and
Mhm.
it's anonymized, completely anonymized. It's very different on audience inside, because you have an access directly on individual accounts. So you can identify, okay, I want to target Noah. No worries. I take your account and I analyze your account, and I understand your segmentation, your universe, your follower, and so on. So it's very different on this part. So when you have individual result, individual data, plus global result around an audience, you combine both and you have this kind of insight, because you can identify maybe new influencer, new ambassador with audience, and you combine that with the strategy, and the strategy it's more around Meta and Surprise.
That was a great explanation. I think if I understand correctly, it's also about like the the difference that kind of stuck with me from your explanation is that with Prism, I hope yeah, you have you you find the audience from a group of audience that exists. Like you're just gonna see like which do I fit in with, right? Sort of. And then with the audience insights, you kind of create your own sort of like figure out something maybe a bit more specific, or not necessarily more specific, but yeah, tailored a bit more to you. So I think it's interesting. I think it can also start because part of the question I think was how do you know which one to go with?
Mhm.
Ideally, it sounds like you're going to get different information from both, but I
Yes,
think a question to kind of think about or ask yourself is, do I already kind of have an idea of where I fit in and I just want validation or want to, find out actually
exactly.
wasn't going the right way,
Yeah.
or I just want to discover
Yeah.
who's.
Yeah, just to summarize, so Prism and Meta is more strategic tool,
Mhm.
and audience is very tactical tool. So like that, you can identify directly your target, and it's not anonymized. But on Surprise, it's very useful and powerful, but you have more broad information.
That was a great way to summarize, because it kind of puts it more clear, like
Yeah,
what's actionable, like what would be the next.
exactly.
I get that.
Exactly. Yeah.
We had one of the first questions. I kind of took them in the
Okay.
wrong order. Was about how many benchmarks are recommended. Is there
Mm,
an industry standard that people tend to consider? Because again, we were talking. I was also talking about there's so much data out there. People get overwhelmed about it. It's just a topic that seems so heavy, and it can
mm.
be. But that's kind of what we're trying to do today, and in the other sessions, kind of talk about it and make it seem like more approachable and give people the tools to know where to start. So yeah, is there a standard, or is
Mm.
there a minimum to start with? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
It's a very important question. That depends of the goal of the study. But in my case, in yeah, I use between 5 and 7 or 8 audience different benchmark to test and to validate some element. In for some element, we need to create a benchmark specifically for an industry just to validate one insight, but maybe it's the most important insight to step uh, and to have another step in the confirmation of the audience. So that depends of the insight or the strategy, of course, but so that depends of the goal. And when I do that, I do 5 on Suprism, and I do exactly the same on audience. So you multiply by 2 if you want to identify strategy and tactical aspect. So influencer and maybe interest and positioning.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I was just looking. Well, somebody, Rajdan, I hope I pronounced that almost correctly, but said, I guess we can conclude that benchmarks are indeed useful, which I think, yes, it's what we're both
Yes.
here to
Yeah.
say.
Yes.
We wanted to start it with a question, but both of us pretty much spoiled it in the first few slides that, yes, we do believe they're very important in both aspects. So definitely when it comes to audience, Gregory did such a good job of really explaining how valuable it is. But then also with just the general social media metrics, it can really, really help you understand, again, where you're starting from, and help you um, pick attainable goals and that are relevant to you. So yeah, thank you. I'll see if there's any last minute questions. I had a one question prepared. Hope it makes sense. But you were talking a bit in the end when you were kind of summarizing that. Uh, you know, you set up a goal in mind. Like you said something like, I wanna launch a new product. So brand strategy. This is what I want to do. Um, the goal for your, obviously, for your analysis and everything. But I was thinking, have you experienced ever that you start with a goal and then maybe you realize, like, yes, we do want to launch a new product, but we just realized during the process that maybe we're not talking to the right audience, so actually we might have to shift a bit, and what I was saying earlier, take a step back and actually let's look at the audience. Are they the right audience? That has that ever happened, or is that something common?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And in this case, it's very important to test different kind of audience, and different kind of benchmark, because for example, when you test an audience and you identify maybe not the relevant content and so on, you can do a step back and modify your strategy, modify your audience, modify your goal. So like that, of course, it's not always white and black. So we need to modify something and some element during the process, just to explain. If I want to create a specific persona for a client, for example, I take around 4 hours, around 3 or 4 hours for the basic audience, basic persona. But for I we want to develop a specific knowledge based on the LGBT plus community. We work around on this specific persona during 4 days to develop a specific knowledge. So we have a lot of step back to modify something, or to develop a specific another point, another level of the definition. So it's not easy, I know that, but yeah, we can help the client on this universe. But of course, to develop a specific knowledge on the benchmark, and if the benchmark is very complex, like a persona, that take a lot of test, maybe error and modification.
Mhm. Amazing. Yeah, I think the takeaway is always tweak and adapt, and like
Mm,
it's gonna
exactly.
be a longer process, but it's
Yes.
important to kind of start somewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for being with us today and sharing,
Thank you.
sharing
Thank you
your
so much.
knowledge and wisdom. It's been so insightful. Um, just a quick summary. I was gonna mention, so the recording will be available for everybody. You're gonna receive it because I know some people came in a bit later and they were asking about it. And we have 3 more sessions. So each Thursday, the next three Thursdays. Next week, we'll be talking about content and what do your top posts say about it. Later on, we'll be talking about reporting, and then we'll be talking about social media analytics tool in general and how do they get the data, what do they show you, and kind of peeking behind the curtain a bit on that because we know how interesting and sometimes foreign it seems. So thank you everybody so much for participating with us and engaging. Again, Gregory, thank you so much for your
Thank you
time.
so
It's
much.
a
You
pleasure.
too.
Esther, just a quick, will it be the same access link? I believe so. When you register, you can register to each webinar, so you can go back to the registration and check that out. Um, and yes, Nadine, you can definitely do that. We have a specific form. Let me quickly, yes, let me quickly send it over to you. I'm so sorry to keep you, Gregory. 1 second. Uh, oh, oh, I think I got it. Okay. There we go. Let me get back to my Zoom. Nadine, I'm just putting the form right here. Thank you, everybody, so much. I see a lot of people have mentioned it was super valuable and such a great session, and I'm really happy to hear that. And we hope to see you next week. I wish everybody a good day or a good night wherever you are, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.